again.
That's all I could think of was Green Acres, and that we were gonna move out into the country, and I was gonna be like Lisa, and Bob was gonna be like Oliver Wendell Douglas, and
all big.
Yeah. What kind of equipment have I got? It's all
big.
big.
Down a dirt road that when it rains turns into snot.
We had dresses here. We had high heels here. We did jewelry. So they had to actually consciously confront the fact that we were gay, we're queer.
If you grew up there, you might know where I mean. If you grew up there like me.
A good harvest depends on a good planting. A good mind depends on a good education. A farmer takes care of his land. He also takes care of his children.
That's my first grade teacher, Mrs. Perkins. That's me over there in the corner. There's my brother Mike. And there in the middle is my sister Patsy. That was my first experience with a film about country life, more than 50 years ago. Recently, I made a trip back to the dairy farm in northern Illinois where I was raised. I think people in the city often have preconceived notions about life in the country, the same way that people in the country can stereotype urban living. When you grow up in the country, there's often a struggle choosing between the rural or city life. As a gay man, that struggle becomes more complex. 30 years ago, staying in the country held little interest as I headed to the city to begin my journey of discovery as a gay man. While I was less familiar with urban life, it seemed like the safest place to start. I still feel a connection to the farm and rural life after all these years. With that in mind, I set out on a journey in search of gay life in rural America. These are conversations with a seldom seen group of men, an almost invisible part of the gay family. Starting the journey in familiar surroundings, I spoke with men in the Midwest who are involved with farming as their connection to the rural life.
Why gay men would do this? Because we love cows. It's what I grew up with. It's a way of life that has always been suited to me and my personality, I guess. That's, some people like the city life. They like the hustle, the bustle, everything that goes on there. I always figured that the city is a nice place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there.
Jeff is now the fourth generation to run his Wisconsin dairy farm. With help from Clint, who he employs, the farm provides their sole source of income. Milking 100 cows twice every day allows only periodic getaways to visit urban friends.
I've been out, I guess, I came out and I didn't even really know it. I always figured that the fact that I was gay was pretty much my own business, and it really wasn't anything for anyone else to worry about. And I pretty much ignored it for a long time. I tried to date women, that really didn't work. I had absolutely no appeal to me in the least. And finally, when I just decided I was tired of being lonely when I was about 32, and decided it was time to start dating. And when I met my ex, after about 8 months, he moved in here. My family knew at that point that I was gay, but when he moved in here, I just found out in the last year that when he moved in, that's when everybody else figured out that I was gay. When suddenly I'm living with, he was our hired man to boot, and that's when word spread like wildfire. And I guess it's kind of interesting that I never even knew it at that point, because there's only one person that I know of that treated me differently. Some old far-right Lutheran geezer who was a cattle jockey who I don't really care for in the first place. If he wants to ignore me, it doesn't really bother me. It saves me time.
Do they know? Yeah. It's no big deal. They don't care. I've got enough. I have 11 gay relatives in my family. So, I mean, you know, like at my sister's wedding, you had the Bob Joneser section, BJU, you know, Bob Jones University section. You had the alcoholic section, and then you had the gay and lesbian section. What I've always done, I've either done that or worked in politics, one of the two. Worked as a political consultant or milked cows. Yes, these were Republican candidates. That's going to raise some eyebrows when this is shown.
I think as far as the gay thing goes, Clint and I are going to be pretty much in agreement that rural people up here are far more accepting than they are down south. But everybody in the community, the people I worked with through 4-H and Junior Holstein Association, and when I say worked with them, I worked with their kids, and I guess that was one of my big concerns. I worked with youth groups all my life. I went from being part of the youth groups right away to being an adult leader. And I was very concerned that some of these people finding out that I was gay was going to be a problem with me working with their kids. I've been great friends to these kids as they've grown up. There's people that are adults and have families now that were kids that I worked with that are good friends of mine. I didn't know how these people were going to handle finding out that this guy that was working with was chaperoning their kids on trips across the country to national conventions and in dairy quiz bowl competitions and judging competitions, how they were going to take the fact that that man is actually gay. And it was a real concern of mine, and I kind of backed off from working with those youth groups for a while. Never once have I had a problem. Never once. And that's why when I came out, I didn't even know it, because they treated me the same.
I feel in a lot of ways that we're just totally ignored. For all practical purposes, we don't exist. And yet we're probably the largest growing segment of the gay population today. There's just, you know, like we said earlier, 25 years ago, guys like us would have never come out. We'd have just kind of kept right on farming along and doing our thing.
I think that's one of the things that makes growing up gay in a rural area so different, is that we don't necessarily feel part of the gay culture as it's been portrayed on TV and what people want to make it seem like. Because rural America is generally a little more conservative, and we're portrayed in magazines like The Advocate as the only viewpoints you ever get is way far to the left. And I'm not that far to the left. I'm certainly not that far to the right. I've always been more of a centrist. I've gotten far more moderate as I've gotten older. Our views seem to get lost in the shuffle somewhere.
One of the misconceptions that I would maybe think is that city people would think a gay person on a farm, that they're just out there twinking around doing nothing serious, and it's like a hobby and they got lots of extra money to spend or something. But I think nowadays any gay people that are really into animal egg production and have been raised on a farm and still want to do it, that they're more inclined to do it these days.
Steve and Jim run a large hog farm in central Wisconsin. It's also a full-time effort in their sole livelihood. Steve's family's farmed in that area for several generations.
Well, this is about a 600 sow operation, and that's how many pigs that I try to produce from. This barn I refer to as a gestation barn. After the sows are bred, then they get moved up here and they stay in here for the length of their gestation period till they're ready to farrow in the farrowing crates. Now this is one of the farrowing rooms. After we bring the sows in, then sows will farrow the little ones, and then they'll be in here approximately, like I said, 17, 18 days. Well, to the really bigger cities, I don't think some of those know there's so much as an existence of us. When you come out to these smaller areas here in the Midwest, the gay people that live in some of these bigger areas like Madison or Milwaukee, I think they're very aware, especially because like we have a summer picnic where we have a pig roast, and we have probably about 200 people attend, and those are all pretty much city people or some other country gay people, but I think it makes them very aware of the rural area and that, yes, gay people do live outside of the city of Madison. So, yeah. Some of the coastal and inner city areas, you can have it as far as I'm concerned, between the congestion and the summer heat and the
pollution and
whatever.
Yeah.
I'll take this any day. I'm pretty happy with it.
All of a sudden, here we were moving to the country. And as a gay man, I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, what are we doing? You know, all I could
Green Acres all over again.
That's all I could think of was Green Acres, and that we were gonna move out into the country, and I was gonna be like Lisa, and Bob was gonna be like Oliver Wendell Douglas. And
when you end up in a rural area, there's sort of a significant stigma attached to being different from those whom you are moving in with. I recall that sometime after we'd moved into the area that the city council had actually or the town council had actually gotten together to try to figure out how they could keep us out. Obviously their attorney set them, if you'll excuse the expression, straight on that score.
While Kevin and Bob are starting a goat dairy on their small farm, they also commute to the city some 40 miles away to jobs to provide them with salaries and benefits.
We left La Crosse, moved to the country here, and one day he just looked at me and said, if you really want to adopt, it's okay. He said, I don't want to, you know, I know it's a dream of yours to have a family, and we're together, and if you really want kids, let's do it now. So that's how we started. Stephanie was 4 when we got her, and at the time, Stephanie was deemed by the state unadoptable. Other couples had looked at her, and because of her special needs, they weren't really interested. Stephanie was diagnosed ADHD and also reactive attachment disorder. She's a very high-spirited little girl, and nobody else wanted her. But we met her, and the minute we met, it just worked. She clicked with us right away. Bob is Papa, and I'm Daddy. When we first got Stephanie, we didn't know how we were going to do that with 2 dads, if it was going to be Daddy 1 and Daddy 2. So we just decided on Papa and Daddy, and that worked out really well.
Yeah, that's worked out.
She started complaining. She was lonely. She wanted a brother. So that's when we started the process again and got Stephen. For some reason, we decided 2 wasn't enough. And then we got Alex, and Alex has been with us now for 10 months. He was legally adopted 3 months ago. So, but we're not done yet. We've decided we would like about 5, so we're still in the process.
By the time I began to edit this film, Kevin and Bob had already achieved their goal of 5, with the adoption of another boy and girl into their family.
I think we met in 1990, one little short afternoon on a beach in California. 1991, he called, came to Chicago for the weekend, and then came here for the week after that. And that's when I spun my little web and I had him.
and I have been a trap ever since.
We board, raise, or we don't raise, we board and train horses. We give riding lessons. We have horse shows here all summer long. We've got about 35 horses on the farm at any one time. We've got several trainers that work at the farm. So it's primarily a lot of anything and everything to do with horses.
As well as operating their 100-acre horse farm, Lou works in banking at a nearby town, while Tom also works as a building contractor.
I tell you, it's all a All big.
Yeah. What kind of equipment have I got? It's all
big.
Big. and the best. Well, being in the farm business is a very, very expensive business to be in, and that's why nowadays no one could just decide they want to be a farmer and go out and buy the land and buy the equipment and be a farmer and survive. You just can't do it. The return isn't there at all. For example, we built a new indoor riding arena 3 years ago. It's an $80,000 building. It takes forever to pay it off. Equipment, this John Deere tractor right here, I bought it brand new back in 74. Only paid $6,800 for it. Now, if I was to replace that tractor today, it'd probably be around $30,000 to $35,000. It's just incredible what things cost and what you have to be in this business. And so we each have our 8 hours apart during the daytime.
Which helps too.
he comes home and he comes home and he loves his flowers and his garden and the yard, and he spends a lot of time doing that. And I do a lot of computer work. I spend a lot of time in my office working, doing the business end of our farm here. So, I mean, we're together a lot, but at the same time, we have our own individual things we do.
In Saigon, yes, in Saigon.
Lou's family was evacuated from Vietnam by the U.S. Army just days before Saigon fell. When the soldiers arrived, he was off visiting a friend, but he had told his family he was off to see his uncle. Lou got left behind and remained in Vietnam for over 2 years before he was able to flee the country.
I'm raised in the city all of my life, and the life I had is very far different than what I am in right now. I came here, I was in Houston, Texas, and I felt more of a discrimination because I am the ethnic more than being a gay. I didn't have any hard time at all because when I was a kid, I was introduced to the Western world at the early age. I found Western man so sexy at the very early age. So when I came here, I didn't have any hard time at all. I felt like I'm at home.
It was definitely all a new experience the first time he saw
everything else.
A big 1,000-pound Holstein cow live and in person. He goes up and puts his hand on it and goes, "Wow, is that big?" And,
it was big.
Or the first time, he's seen a little calf or, anything that we all take for granted on a farm. It was quite a new experience to him.
And also,
the first time he had to shovel manure.
The dirt road too.
The dirt road.
Oh my God. No, because I thought oh my God, it was so beautiful, so romantic. And now I'm like,
it's a goddamn dirt road.
A dirt road.
Hal was raised on a farm in Wisconsin. After college, he moved to Colorado and to the city with his partner at the time. He later returned to Wisconsin and purchased a farm in an area near where he was raised.
I ended up finding my farm that I have here, which is just a 65-acre farm. It's almost all open land. I pasture all the land. And I started milking cows, mostly Jerseys. I did have a few Ayrshires and a few Holsteins as well. Working, it seemed like 24 hours a day. It was a lot of work for me, but I really loved it, was really, really happy. Or I am, I should say, really happy with it.
Hal used to milk 60 cows twice every day, all on his own. With dropping milk prices, he sold his herd and started a beef operation. His milking equipment and dairy barn now stand idle. Hal also has a job in the mental health field, acting as a caretaker for several disabled men.
Mothers and grandmother and great-great-grandmother of several of these young ones in the background. I will go ahead and each year name them something specific. Say like this year they are all getting named after fruit trees. So this year so far there is pear and apple. Now last year I used hardwood trees. So there's hickory and elm and maple. I think there's 6 heifers born last year. And I've done that each year, and next year I will change it to something else. One other year I did birds, you know, like robin and lark and swallow, things like that. So that allows me to go ahead and keep a record of the cattle.
While visiting Hal, he gave me a description of the process he uses to inseminate his cattle and propagate his herd.
The tank that I have will hold the liquid nitrogen for 6 months, which is what keeps the semen frozen that I breed the cattle with. There's what's called racks of semen, and in each rack there are 10 units of semen, which is just like a very narrow straw, and I clip one end of it and put it onto the inseminator, and then I have to go inside the cow with one hand, and the other one I push the tube in, go through the cervix of the cow so that I can deposit the semen right into the uterus.
To fatten the cattle and improve the quality of the meat, the male calves are castrated. Hal showed me the latest in castration technology.
Bands that go over the 4 little spikes. And then from there, it just squeeze it stretches it apart, and I can pull her testicles through, making sure both testicles are down, and then I can go ahead and release it and then go ahead and take it off. And then they're done. I don't have to do a thing with them.
How long does it normally take for them?
Actually, it'll take a month. I've seen them hang there almost as much as 2 months, even though the skin tissue is dead. It's just dried and it will just hold on for a long time. So they aren't feeling anything. Actually, after probably 3 days, they don't feel anything anymore. It numbs it, and it's more of just an irritation because of something squeezing around for such a long time.
In Colorado, Hal was involved with the beginnings of the first all-gay rodeo. It now has become a large nationwide activity.
I have been out of the rodeo for quite a few years now. I now have joined NSGRA, which is the North Star Gay Rodeo Association, which is based out of Minneapolis-St. Paul, Minnesota. It is the states of Minnesota and Wisconsin combined together. They will be having their rodeo this year, the 5th and 6th of July, and I'm going up to compete for my first time again in quite a while. I'll be doing some of the lesser events because I'm a little bit older. I used to ride the bulls and the broncs, and I've got a lot of buckles for doing that, and I'm very proud of each and every one of them. No matter whether it is taking a steer down or riding a bull, to me that it was a great thing to do. And yes, there's one called the Wild Drag Race, and I was the one that had to wear the wig and the dress. But I was also the one that could go ahead and ride the darn steer across the line. So it made sense for me to do that. Her name was Tona. She's a buckskin mare. I used to go ahead and take her to game shows and compete in the timed events like the barrel racing, etc. And for some odd reason, the old mare just knew everything that I wanted her to do. I was never good at roping or doing anything with the animals as far as catching them in rodeo, but she seemed to know what I wanted her to do. She was just a part of me, and I a part of her. She passed away last year on March 6th, or on March 7th, I'm sorry. And that was probably one of the most heartbreaking times of my whole life. It's like losing your best friend. So old Tona is buried on my farm, and I love her dearly. And I was going to go ahead and tribute this and dedicate this to anyone. It'd be a simple thing, like an old buckskin mare that I really love.
But the last rodeos that I competed in were in New Mexico, and that would have been 13 years ago. And I rode bulls and did everything. And now I'm just sort of retiring and doing some of the easier ones and having more fun.
We're riding home upon our horses. Well, I'm sitting side saddle, of course. My man is riding straddle saddle. He sits upon his favorite horse. We are so happy to be a country family. My man, our horses and me. My man, our horses and me. Bring it down, fellas. My man, our horses and me.
Colin, who is president of the local rodeo association and also known as Black Bart, explains some of the rodeo events.
They don't think that the events might be legitimate in the sense that we do bull riding, bareback bronc riding, and they're done essentially the same way as professional rodeo. We are amateur, so you stay on 6 seconds to get a score instead of 8 seconds. And some of the events have been modified to increase the safety to contestant and to the animals. A perfect example would be some of the roping events when they throw their loop on the calves, for example, in calf roping. Once the slack is taken out, they let go, or the tail end is tied with a piece of yarn to the horn, and that snaps off, and that's when you get your time. So we don't jump off and rope the animals or anything like that. So we try to, in gay rodeo, enhance the safety to the contestants and to the animals.
Some of the other ones would be, say, something what sounds real silly, which is called goat dressing. You have to run up to this goat that is tied to a stake and put a pair of underwear on it. Then you go ahead and run back and touch the timer, and again, the fastest time goes ahead and wins. It's fun, and it's silly, but hey, we're out there for a good time.
A surprise visitor to the rodeo was Clint. He had decided to take a weekend getaway from the dairy farm and try his luck as a bull rider, with only brief success.
This is the first gay rodeo I've ever been to. That rope has to be tied around that bull or you'll just blow out. Well, you got to go 6 seconds, then you want off, as gracefully as you can go.
Riderless horse ceremony. It's based on a military ceremony. Probably the most famous example was when President John Kennedy JFK was assassinated.
Done at all rodeos? Or?
It's done at every gay rodeo. You put usually the boot or boots are in the stirrups laying loose, and I'm heading back down to signify that the bond between the animal and the rider has been severed. And for us, it's a way of honoring those who have gone before us, those who have died, who are contestants, and also just people who have just gone before us. It's a very nice ceremony, and it's very meaningful to a lot of the contestants and spectators.
With one less dancer waltzing through tonight. There's one less dancer tonight. So when you take your partner in your arms, hold him tight.
Always fascinated by the beauty of the West, I traveled to one of America's most rural and least populous states to observe a most unique pride celebration. With an entire statewide population that is less than many small U.S. cities, gay life there can be quite different, but yet very familiar. With the event situated not far outside Laramie, I felt I had to ask about Matthew Shepard and how his death had affected the gay community there.
Well, I was here in Laramie when Matthew was killed. I knew Matthew, and I was the chair of the student organization at the time. I think that people had a lot of different reactions when Matthew was killed. There were a lot of people who went back into the closet. There were a lot of people who came out of the closet and said, you know, I can no longer be silent. This is something that I feel I need to be vocal and active about now.
Matthew Shepard's beating and ultimate death and murder affected Laramie in a profound way. I had just moved back to Laramie the May before he was killed in October. I had a good friend who was fag bashed and thrown in the Hudson River in New York City. So I had some experience with hate crimes.
But one of the side effects of that situation is that many of the people in our community were so shocked and stunned by that incident and Matthew's death that they went back into the closet and stopped attending functions. And I think it's been 5 years. People are starting to come back and feeling a little safer, and it did have its effect on our community.
It's changed me in ways I never would have dreamed. I think it's opened my eyes a lot in terms of the world around me. It's made me much more aware of the way that different forms of media can bend the truth.
It was really hard because Laramie's a good place, and sure there are homophobes in Laramie, and like there are in New York City, in the West Village, and his death affected that community in profound ways. There was a huge communal sorrow that swept through that town that I always knew Laramie had a big heart. It's one of my favorite places in the world for a good reason. There was a certain amount of, we just don't talk about it, like there is in all small communities. But with his tragedy, it was able to, the dialogue was opened up even more so. And it's hard to say, but in that horrible thing, I think some good things did come out of it.
I spoke with the president of United Gays and Lesbians of Wyoming about their less traditional pride event.
Okay, we're in the Pole Mountain area of Medicine Bow National Forest, so we're actually on public land that we just lease from the National Forest Service. The site that we use is completely unimproved campground, so everything we do is hauled in here by truck. So we haul in all the canopies, the big top, the generators, the porta potties, the dumpsters, the sound system. Vendors come up to sell food and other gay paraphernalia like t-shirts and stuff. And we just literally create a small city in the state of Wyoming. And let me tell you, when you have 400 people in one place in Wyoming, you're really talking about a group because this state is so sparsely populated. What we decided to do was copy the old Mountain Man rendezvous, where they got together once a year and created a sense of community for them, in which they had all kinds of competitions and fun and games, and they renewed old friendships, and they created new friendships. And I think we're being real successful at doing that here.
Quick, quick, slow, slow, 1 and 2.
We put a lot of thought into the location that we use for rendezvous, trying to make it at a spot where there wouldn't be a lot of outside traffic running through, causing those people who are not really out to feel uncomfortable.
While visiting the gathering, I met Kenny. This was his 3rd summer he's traveled from his farm in eastern Colorado to Rendezvous. This is the only gay function he's ever attended.
And so I got on the internet and run into the UGLW internet site and got stuff on this, the Rendezvous, and decided I was going up. And this is actually the first time I'd come out when this happened, so spent 48 years on farm so far. Yeah, it is for me. Yeah, it is for me. It's the isolation is basically what it boils down to. Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, that's why I come up here. When I first decided I was gay, I guess you'd say, I went and told my local doctor about it, and he says, well, he says, go over to mental health services and set up an appointment with them and talk to them, because I was a little stressed, you know, at the time, and mental health says, well, basically not much going on in this area, so you might as well move to California if you actually want to see what's going on. And also being on the farm and trying to stay on the farm is another can of worms, because trying to find a mate that's actually interested in agriculture or something like that is just practically like getting struck by lightning. That's what it boils down to, at least in my experience so far.
The featured entertainer at the event was Mark Weigel. His music has generated a large following among gay men with rural and western connections.
4 cowboy boots gliding on air, turning and turning, while I stand and stare.
I mean, just in a general sense, and this is as far as rural gay and urban gay, it's kind of, you know, chic for urban gays to sort of disparage, those hicks out in the country, or, when I tell people I'm coming to Wyoming to do this gig, Wyoming, all the jokes, watch out for the, blah, blah. I moved to California, to the San Francisco Bay Area in 1990, and actually the first song on my first CD is called If You Grew Up There, and it's about, being in California, and that's great in some ways, but really missing Minnesota and, again, appreciating even the weather there, believe it or not, I really miss, and the change of seasons. I do what's true for me and, express the things that are important for me, and then that in turn sort of resonates for people who feel similarly, and they sort of gravitate towards my music. And over the years, I've sort of gotten clear about who my people are, who my audiences are. So folks who like country music, a lot of times have never heard country music that is like guy love songs and gay themes.
Finally he looks around, he says, what have I told you in the last 5 minutes that I love you? I just wanted you to know it, it's been on my mind. Have I told you in the last 5 minutes that
I'm sort of all about the fringe of the fringe, not the urban circuit boy kind of, but rural guys and pause guys and guys over 40, 50, 60, and bears and cowboys and leather guys and everybody that you never see in mainstream gay media.
I talked about life in Wyoming with Bob, who is a Laramie native, HIV positive, and a local AIDS activist.
I was born and raised in Laramie. I grew up in Laramie. I got my degree from the University of Wyoming. I came out in Laramie, and I lived for 12 years on the East Coast. And in 1998, my lover died in 1995, and in 1998 I came back to Wyoming and have been trying to do prevention and treatment issues with HIV. Besides enjoying being around all my queer brothers and sisters and enjoying the tribal feeling that we all have and being amongst our people, I'm here working with a group we have in Laramie called the Albany County AIDS Project. And we do free, anonymous and confidential bloodless HIV screenings. living in Wyoming and being HIV positive is a real challenge, and especially in the smaller communities where you might be going to see the doctor that gave birth to you, or that was there when you were born, I should say. So a lot of people who are newly diagnosed or closeted in their diagnosis will end up driving for a couple hours to receive their medical care. We're trying to deal with that through a new program that we've just applied for a grant, which is a Title III rural and frontier state AIDS treatment program. There are certain attitudes about gay people that are in an urban setting and gay people in a rural setting, in that we don't have a strong community. You can't go to the local gay bar out here. Wyoming doesn't have any gay bars. People, I think, in Wyoming have a much stronger tendency to pair up and stay together in some ways longer. And if you're single, you tend to stay single longer. But also, we're all queer, so that's the big equalizer too. We're the same as big people in the city.
As I traveled to New Mexico, I met a group of men, all with past experiences living in big cities. They now have found a spiritual connection in the amazing remote rural landscape.
Does it feel like home?
It's been a slow process, but I mean, I am officially, self-employed, doing freelance websites and Flash animation and Flash websites, and just,
While living in Chicago, Craig was truly tapped into urban living and music as part of the rave, punk, and queer art scenes. He's left city life behind with no regrets.
Well, when I was a city boy, I probably would have thought of all the typical stereotypes of rural folks, and then it was quite a process for me to become like rural identified. And then once I did that, it was really hard for me to connect with, queer folk from the city, because they just we had such different realities that it was hard for us to find common ground. We're doing such different things that's partly why I've, been sort of monastic while I've been here. And I love my Airstream. It's a '69 Airstream, and I have it all, painted and groovalized inside. And it's great, it's like a studio apartment on wheels. I actually have a Cancer moon, which to me, this is just like a crab shell, you know what I mean? It's a total crab shell. So for me, the womb-like environment is actually okay. It's not too small or confining, because if I need to be out, I'm either usually outside, working in the garden, or I'm inside, at the computer, or just chilling or whatever, So it's not, I'm still pretty happy with the limitations it presents, but it's got a little kitchen. I mean, Airstream was, state of the art in '69, so it's got all the amenities. So through my friend, I got hooked up with my friend Shelly, whose garden this is. She's actually a psychic and does spiritual and nutritional counseling. So I worked with her nutritionally over the phone. And basically shifted my diet around and brought my body back into balance. And then after 8-9 months, I sort of had a spiritual, for me, I had kind of a conscious connection with my spirit. Something shifted, a little doorway opened a crack. And I just had a whole other kind of connection. I guess I look at it just as my body had healed enough to sort of support that. And so after 9 months of that, it was totally obvious that I had to get out of town. It was totally obvious because, one of the things I realized after I left Chicago is that how shut down I had to be to live in the city. I just went up and met the Radical Fairies for the first time, and they're really, for me, the first men that I've met that have been combining, sexuality and spirituality, and it was beautiful. It was an amazing thing, and it was definitely what I'm about too, you know.
I traveled to meet with some of the radical fairies that Craig had talked about. I asked some of the men to try and explain the fairy life. Jericho was the only person that I spoke with who's actually living at a radical fairy community now. Before moving to New Mexico, Jericho had spent a number of years living and working with theater in New York City.
Yeah, well, I was dying in the city. I mean, I started to really get sick, and I started to become a weird kind of hermit person, sort of stayed in my apartment and sort of narrowed down the people I talked to like 4 people, and I was just not happy. That's one of those things that I find with fairies is that when they're with each other, they don't identify themselves as fairies, they talk about the fairies, but when they're not with fairies, they identify themselves as fairies, and so it's this really sort of weird kind of nebulous thing.
The community is not fully self-sufficient, so most of the residents have outside jobs. Jericho now works part-time as a waiter at a small tourist campground nearby.
You get the feeling that there's something we're supposed to be doing, that we're here for a purpose, and even if it is an aberration, which biologically makes a certain kind of sense, but you know, you can say that the human race is an aberration to cause the destruction of Earth for some universal chaotic plan, but you know, we have a purpose too, and that's what I think this whole thing is about. Is what is that purpose, and how can we best fulfill it, and how can we... It can get really foo-foo and out there if you really want me to go there, you know, but we know it's sort of that we're here to do something. A lot of people talk about their personal missions and their goals, and it can feel almost like you're in like Lord of the Rings sometimes, you know, with everybody's special magic powers and there's like these little communities, and they're so isolated and very specific, and it's interesting.
After many years of living in LA, Joel also became part of the local radical fairy family.
I see radical fairies as a tribe of queers who are finding an expression of who they are as queers, using spirit as a guide. And there's everyone that calls themselves a radical fairy has a different definition of it and a different expression of it and a different whatever of everything. So it's very anachronistic, if you will.
After struggling through his first long, cold winter at the sanctuary, Joel is now managing a newly formed bed and breakfast.
I managed an estate in Beverly Hills for 7 years. Big estate. Owner lived out of state primarily, but had this 10,000 square foot Mediterranean-esque palace that he frequented and guests came to, so it was like a hotel type thing. I loved LA, and I loved the city, I loved the climate, I loved the variety, and I just got tired of it. Got tired of the too much man-made input and really seeking nature more. Nature's input to me rather than all the man-made competition and stuff that goes along with that. And I told her my ideas about B&B and some of my background, and everything just meshed, came together, and all of a sudden I knew that's what I was going to do. So I'm living in this lovely house, large adobe house, 4 bedrooms, and we're starting Oso Vista Bed and Breakfast. And the nature really feeds me here. The views, the plants, the animals, it's all very precious and it's dear to me, and they speak to me. I'm finding greater satisfaction being spoken to by them rather than McDonald's or Walmart or a Mercedes zipping down the street or whatever.
Before arriving in New Mexico, McKee was part of Fort Lauderdale gay life for a number of years. He had a variety of jobs there that included managing a popular gay bar. With an ailing partner and growing weary of the party life, McKee moved to rural Tennessee, where he first met the Radical Fairies.
And met the Radical Fairies, and living on a farm and an outhouse and cutting your own wood, and it gave me strength. I lost weight. I found myself in in a happier place. I live on 25 acres, which is a long rectangular land at the end of a road, so there's no other cars that drive past me. I live at 7,300 feet down a dirt road that when it rains turns into snot. To get groceries, it's an hour and 20 minutes into town. It's about 70 miles total, one way. If I wanted to have a beer at the end of the day, that would be a 80-mile round trip drive to go get a beer. Then I went off and studied interior design, and I worked in Boca Raton, Florida, which was, like one of the snobbiest places in the world. And working on $1 million homes, ordering, $100 a yard fabrics for people who will never sit on it.
McKee is a skilled potter and earns his living selling his works at various shows throughout the West.
I call it spirit. Spirit moves through me, and sometimes things come out of my mouth that I have no idea how they got there. But so I get in touch with spirit, and spirit and I had a very long conversation about ceramics, and I believe that I'm learning a lot of life lessons through the discipline of ceramics. So it could be called a religion. Right? I have the biggest dick. This is my sculpture that I did right before moving here, and I thought about this house and the amount of time it was going to take and the dedication, and I wanted to put that into a body of work, and so that's how this dick came about. And I wanted my work, this penis, to stay full of life and engorged and look at the point of orgasm. And I want my life to be just like that. So this was my meditation, to keep my life orgasmic. And this is a fountain, and I took this up to Colorado to fire in a friend's kiln so I could get this Chinese red. And some people have told me that it looks like the pain and brutality of masculinity. And that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to show the passion of erection. And so that's where I went with my red big penis. So this is my experiment. I think it's been done, but I haven't read a book on it. My foundation is a gravel footer, 18 inches deep and 18 inches wide. The sandbag is, I think, 16 by 28 inches wide. This is a filled sandbag that I'm just leveling the earth as I go. Then I put my post and beam structure up and my window jacks, and then I'm filling it in as I go. So the one part of sandbag is once it's full, you just fold it under and set it down, and then using a piece of wood, pack it until it forms the bag. And as it forms the bag keeps its shape and it becomes solid, which happens to be just like ceramics. So as I'm building this, I realize it's just turning into a large sculpture. I bartered with a neighbor to help cut down these trees, and he hauled them in exchange for me working for him. And then I stripped off the bark with what is called a draw knife, which is an old-fashioned tool that peels the skin off. And gosh, I've never worked so hard. And so I really found that when I was working hard, I got in closer sense of who I was. it gave me more strength in my presence of being. I've spent, including the roof that isn't here yet, I've spent $3,000 on a 28 by 20 house, and don't have much more to spend, or else I would. But it doesn't fit into what society can market as a home. It doesn't have the testings that other building techniques do. So I can't tell you where I'm located, because that would be I would be telling you to come and look for me. And once I get it covered up, I'll just tell you it's an adobe house.
In eastern Pennsylvania, I met two rather remarkable men who were drawn to the country as part of a vision to create a community of gay men based on spirituality and simple technology. By choice, there's no running water or electricity at their property.
Well, gay people in the city or in New York, we've had many people come here to visit, and they think we're crazy. They really can't understand this. It seems that their life is so connected to their friends and clubs and going out together and doing activities with other gay people, that when they see us here being almost completely isolated, they can't believe we're gay. To them, gayness means having a herd of gay guys around you. But well, it's more than that.
I was a student at the University of Utah, and one day I was in the student union with my lunch, which at that time I was a vegetarian, so I had my little home-baked whole wheat bread and my sprouts and my celery sticks and carrot sticks and my apple. Okay, so I sat down, eat my lunch, and 2 tables away was this guy who was eating like a hamburger and fries, and ketchup was all over everything. Everything was just greasy, but he was so beautiful, so good looking. It turned out to be this guy. And I kept thinking, well, I really want to say something to him, but he's like 2 tables away, and if I actually get up and go over there, it's going to be so embarrassing to me.
I was a great beauty.
He was a truly great beauty. He was a knockout. Asked him out for a date, and we went to see the movie which became our movie, The Omen. Yeah, right. And it sure has been. So that's how, and it wasn't long after that we moved in together and had our first us against them thing, because our first apartment was had a balcony on it, and we were making hot love on the balcony, not realizing there was an apartment building next door which had all these Mormon matrons in there. And this is like, what, 76? 76. So they were not ready for openly gay sex on the balcony. So
we got thrown the hell out.
We got thrown the hell out of there, boy. Oh, yeah. I tell you. It was in Salt Lake where we got the initial idea for a community, because the early Mormons were communal. And I felt drawn to that. And so we spent a couple of years looking for land, finally found this place, which was barren at that time except for the barn, and started building this vision we had of a place where gay men could lead sexual, spiritual lives.
As a measure of the level of commitment to their dream, the men formerly known as Gary and Michael have legally changed their names in recognition of the man whose original vision inspired them. They are now known as Johannes and Christian Zinzendorf.
The original Christian Zinzendorf had a large following of men, and he believed that he was the embodiment of the Christ, that physically he was the Christ, and he had his brothers come to him and to make love to his body as an outpouring of a mixture of the sexuality and sensuality and spirituality. But that was the key that we found that we had been looking for is sort of using our bodies as a vessel of expression, not just for getting off, but for many areas, for all of the Christian ideas like compassion and caring and service, and sort of broadening what it meant to be gay. We had to decide if we were going to haul a trailer on the property, or what kind of environment we wanted to create.
They have single-handedly moved a number of historic structures from other farms in the valley, dismantling them and reassembling them piece by piece on their land. Early on, the creation of the Hermitage was viewed with skepticism and scrutiny by many from the surrounding close-knit Pennsylvania Dutch community.
Slept in the barn on the floor. It was really hard. We built a room in there, but what we found out was it was so hard to insulate. It was freezing. So we stayed there for a year and a half till we built this one. We wanted to model this whole community after a Moravian community from the 1700s. There was a big brotherhood in Pennsylvania. And we wanted to copy that feeling of being close to the earth, close to everything, not being on the grid. And later we realized that we were spending so much time living the simple life that we weren't able to enjoy the life. We were chopping wood, we were making candles, we were doing all this stuff, we were preserving food, and it was just overwhelming. Because they had 88 brothers at the Moravian settlement that we were copying, and we only had 2. So, so after a while, what happens? You just can't. You have to make some serious choices. That we wanted to enjoy ourselves here, but at the same time, we wanted to have sort of an otherworldly feeling, sort of a back to earth or a spiritual kind of place.
The land and community are set up as a non-profit organization. Johannes handles most of the day-to-day business of running the place. Christian commutes some distance to a full-time position. He works as a special education teacher.
And it's only been in the past maybe 4 years I've decided, well, I really want to get back to the city. And so once a month or so I do an R&R trip to New York. And I'll see a concert or a play or an opera and eat in a Hindu restaurant. I love the Hindu section of Queens. I go up there and shop around and take the bus in, take the bus back. It's a very long day. I'm glad to see New York, and I'm glad to leave, and I'm glad to get back here. So now I have a balance.
It's pretty simple. I collect this bucket of water, usually once every day, once every 2 days, and you just pour the water in here, like that. So I'll take a sponge bath, or just soap up and wash down, and it's pretty easy. Once you get used to doing that, it's like taking a shower. I can do it in 2 minutes. You just get out of bed and lather up and
rinse off.
Yeah, rinse off. And the floor gets wet, but it's just a wooden floor, so it doesn't hurt it.
Johannes and Christian often present workshops and travel to provide demonstrations of some of the historic skills they've researched and mastered. They showed me how the flax they've raised is turned into linen.
We lay this stuff out for about a month on the ground after it's pulled, and it dry rots a little bit. This is a flax break. And just like I did on the scutching board, I lay the flax over the board here, and instead of pounding it by hand, this is an automated machine here. Get it revved up. Yeah.
Spinn, spinn, meine liebe Dotter, no kauf ittern Frack. Ja, ja, meine liebe Mami, und den mit mir Sack. Ich kann wieder spinnen, mein Fiendisch wird immer, und du mir weh, so weh. Spin, spin, my dearest daughter, I'll buy you a dress. Yes, yes, my dearest mommy, but it must be the best. I can't do my spinning, my fingers not mending. Oh help, the pain is so great. So the mother goes through asking the daughter I'll buy you some shoes, I'll buy you a cow, I'll buy you a horse. And every time the girl says, no, I cannot spin, I've hurt my finger and I simply can't do it. Finally, the mother sings, spin, spin, my dearest daughter, I'll buy you a man. Yes, yes, my dearest mommy, as fast as you can, I can do my spinning. My finger's now mending. It's gone, the pain is all gone. So that's our Pennsylvania Dutch spinning song there.
After developing an internet website and publicizing one of their events, the technology of the 21st century and gay life collided head-on with their 18th century ambitions.
An anonymous letter was put in the library book drop that said, do you know that Brother Zinzendorf is actually operating a gay site, and that this is an inappropriate use of taxpayers' dollars, and that we feel you should do something about this.
We also had a recreational page that after all of these activities, we could get together and if somebody wanted to do drag or the different gay things, we have stuff they could dress up in, and we really got into the gay area.
That was hard to take because we were left with no computer access. And then, but that wasn't the end of it. Then we found out that people were actually going not only to our website, but to other sites where I had writings of mine, very gay writings, and took them to the local school district at a time when I was involved with a diversity coalition that was trying to do diversity education in the schools, acceptance of diversity.
They kind of knew we were funny, but here it was on paper. And the guy had, whoever was reading our website, passed all these papers out showing that we had dresses here. We had high heels here. We did jewelry. So they had to actually consciously confront the fact that we're gay, we're queer, and they hoped to get us out of here. Things just blew up. The township came over and said they had a meeting and they were revoking our non-profit status.
So we decided to meet with the principal and sat down, and the first thing he did was pass out copies of articles I had written on different sites. He had actually had teachers looking at the web for things that about us they could use against us.
I think they felt we were enticing outsiders to come here and maybe proselytize to their kids, or somehow this was like an opening for all these weird city people to come. And
I had a meeting though with the local ministerium, and at that meeting I felt like it was the Inquisition, because there were other ministers there who really drilled me. Old Testament biblical terms. What you're doing is wrong, and they quoted, chapter and book and verse. And finally, one of the young ministers said, in fact, he was like a trainee, a minister in training, said, I feel very uncomfortable with this. I don't feel that we're really acting like Christians here. A couple of other ministers spoke up and said, well, this is what they're doing. They're very upfront about it. It says on the website they're not Christian. They've not made any pretense that they're Christian. They're doing what they want to do, and that's that.
So once they realized that nothing happened, they stopped. But it really was a witch hunt. It was really a strange phenomenon.
At that time, it was just a continuation of all that we had been going through. I mean, we had been shot at, our animals had been shot, one had been killed, one wounded. We would have what I call drive-bys after the bar closed, come by and just scream out faggot. And my favorite one was faggot, go home. I thought, I am home. where am I supposed to go? This is my home, And so we really lived in fear. in fear and cowered in fear. And just anytime a car would come down the road at night, I started to shake because I didn't know if they were just going to just keep on going or if they were going to stop, harass us.
You have all these people who were at least your acquaintances, and all of a sudden they're your enemies, and then all of a sudden they're your friends again. It's really weird.
Well, our relationship has really gone through a lot of changes, a lot of stresses, a lot of failures. I mean, we no longer sleep together. We don't have sets anymore. He sleeps in his house, I sleep in my house. And that was, I think, the hardest change to adapt to. But now, my love for him is still as great, probably greater now than ever. I really appreciate him a lot more. I mean, I wouldn't be here except for him. I don't mean just the financial part, but we have been each other's bulwark through all of this. The only person we could depend upon was each other.
Looking back at my travels and making this film, in some strange way my country roots and gay life, which had always seemed like two separate worlds, were bridged by the experience. Meeting such a diverse group of men, it's hard to generalize anything about rural gay life. But I liked how the Hermits summed up their experience.
Have people realize that the place is for a family of people to live, and hopefully a perpetuating family of people that will stand far.
A gay family.
A gay family.
Yeah. Well, to me, this is like, it's a very brave thing I think we're doing, and it's like a mini Stonewall that never gets much publicity. Just one small step for gay kind.
Yeah.
So it always has a far-reaching effect that you never see. There'll be one little kid seeing us who will be affected and changed by that. There'll be something will be good. So it's worth stepping out, and we have nothing to lose. We're known homosexuals. So what more can they do to us?
Thunderclouds and shreds by night, pink and black and blue and gold. If you grew up there, then maybe you know where I mean. If you grew up there like me. So if you're driving through California on a visit from my home state, you might just see me hanging out my window, waving my home state plate. And I'll tell you why, it's 'cause I know you'll smile, and folks here just ain't that way. It's blue and white and green, but you know that if you grew up there like me. No, this ain't winter, and no, I'm not cold, and these ain't fall colors, you call this a storm. Told if I have patience, the seasons will show. Well, I ain't got none, don't you know? It's just that I miss my home. If you grew up there, you'd know. Yeah, I know. I seen him down there to the store, don't you know? I says to him, I says, now, Bert,